the night I stopped covering for my husband. I was 48 when my 81-year-old mother, Margaret Hayes, called me during a violent spring storm and asked if she could stay at my house for a few nights because a fallen tree had smashed through the roof of her farmhouse. And before I could even answer, my husband, Daniel, quietly said from across the dining room, "No, she can find somewhere else," as though my mother were a stranger asking to borrow money rather than the woman who had spent years helping us whenever our lives fell apart. I remember standing there with a half finished cup of tea in my hand, listening to rain hammer the windows, while Daniel explained that he had an important presentation on Monday, hated interruptions, and did not want anyone sleeping in the upstairs bedroom. But what unsettled me most was how quickly he had dismissed her before I had even finished saying hello. I told Mom I would pick her up myself, drove through flooded streets to her darkened farmhouse, and found her sitting beneath the porch awning with two suitcases, a cardboard box of photographs, and the old quilt she had sewn when I was a child. And when she saw me, she immediately said, "If this causes trouble between you and Daniel, I can stay at a motel," which made something inside me ache because she was apologizing for needing shelter. Instead of taking her to a motel, I brought her to a small cottage I had inherited from my aunt near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, a place Daniel had repeatedly urged me to sell because he considered it useless property. And while Mom slept in the bedroom beside the lake, I began sorting through documents stored in an old cedar chest, only to discover mortgage statements, investment records, and letters showing that Daniel had quietly transferred substantial amounts of our savings into a private construction venture I had never heard about. The next morning, Daniel began calling before sunrise, demanding that I return home with the cedar chest because he suddenly needed the original financial papers. And when I asked why, his answer was strangely rehearsed. "It's nothing serious, just paperwork for the bank." But I had lived with him for 26 years and knew the difference between his normal irritation and the careful calm he used when he was hiding something. I contacted an attorney named Rebecca Monroe in Madison, who reviewed the records and discovered that Daniel had been using our joint savings to finance an ambitious waterfront restaurant project with an old colleague. While several documents contained language suggesting that I had been informed about the investment and had verbally supported it, something I knew was completely untrue. Rebecca did not tell me to confront him immediately because she wanted every transaction documented first. So for 2 days, I quietly gathered bank statements, tax records, emails, loan applications, and copies of property documents, while Mom sat at the kitchen table listening to the waves and occasionally reminding me that I did not have to destroy my marriage simply because she had needed a place to sleep. Then I found the message that changed everything. An email Daniel had sent to his business partner saying, "She trusts me with the money, and if she finds out later, I'll handle the conversation." And beneath it was a proposed loan using our primary home as collateral, which meant his plan was not merely to gamble our savings but to put the roof over our heads at risk without my consent. When I finally called Daniel, I did not scream or accuse him of stealing, because Rebecca had taught me that anger could make people careless while calm questions made them reveal themselves. And after I asked whether he had ever told his partners that I approved the loan, he hesitated before saying, "You would have said no, and I was trying to build something for us." To which I answered, "You cannot call something ours when you deliberately kept me out of the decision." That evening, instead of meeting him privately, I attended a meeting with the investors, handed Rebecca's documentation to the lender, and calmly explained that I had never authorized the proposed collateral. After which the room became painfully quiet, and Daniel finally admitted that he had convinced himself his intentions were more important than my permission. The business collapsed within months after the lender withdrew from the proposed financing and the investors discovered that Daniel had underestimated construction costs. But I never felt victorious because watching him lose money did not erase the 26 years of birthdays, road trips, hospital waiting rooms, children's graduations, and ordinary mornings we had shared. And even after we separated, I kept remembering the man who once drove through a blizzard to help my mother repair her furnace, and wondering when that man had become someone who could make a life changing decision for both of us while believing that secrecy was justified by good intentions. Mom eventually returned to her repaired farmhouse, and before she left the cottage, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I never wanted you to choose me over your husband." And I told her I didn't choose you over him. I chose honesty over pretending everything was fine. Months later, Daniel and I met for coffee, and for the first time, he admitted without excuses that his real fear had been growing older, watching his career stall, and believing that one successful business could prove he was still capable of creating something important. While I realized that our marriage had not been destroyed by one storm, one guest room, or one investment, but by years of small compromises that taught both of us to mistake silence for peace. I still do not know whether we will ever rebuild the marriage we once had, but I know that when my mother needed a safe place to sleep, I stopped treating kindness as an inconvenience and stopped protecting a version of my life that required me to ignore the truth. And if you have ever been forced to choose between keeping everyone comfortable and finally standing up for yourself, remember that sometimes the quietest decision is the one that changes everything. So please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.